Okay, so I'm going to leave my colleagues here. We're doing this panel a bit differently. This is not a me asking questions. We've all got a different parts to play today, so we're tag teaming. But I will just mention this is Saira, this is Tamsin, and this is Mark. So we are going to discuss this together. So we're going to now talk about a bit of an elephant in the room, and that is, while we're all busy doing all of this good diversity work, we've had obviously really shocking revelations this year. I think for those of us working with the ambition of improving culture in the industry, it has certainly been disappointing, to say the least, to have, first of all, the scandal around the CBI in February, and then, of course, the Crispin Odey scandal, and, of course, that has proven existential for that firm. But obviously, we can either get despondent or we can get determined, and or perhaps both, let's be honest. So what we want to do at the Diversity Project, what we've been working on, and actually this started with a discussion with our advisory council, some of whom are here today. Steve, Darren, Paris are all members of the advisory council. Mark is as well, and I can see a few others, John. So we've got lots of people here. We had a discussion in February, the same month that the CBI scandal broke, and agreed that although individually in our firms, people have speak up helplines, they have a lot of ways that people can come forward if they experience or witness poor behaviour, then we didn't really know the extent of the problem, and we certainly didn't know the extent of the problem across the industry. So, as I say, we are ambitious at the Diversity Project, and we decided we were going to, first of all, find out what was going on. So we launched Safe Space. It launched in May. It took us a couple of months to get it all organised and to decide how we're going to do this. Now, this is something that's on the website. The address is there. So if you have experienced or witnessed poor behaviour of any sort, doesn't have to be sexism, it could be racism, it could be bullying, any of the normal sort of things that you would regard as poor behaviours, you can report confidentially through this channel. You can set out what happened, and you can ask for help if you want it. It will be open permanently, or I should say, yes, indefinitely. So this is not kind of just a reaction to what's happened. And we do encourage people to come forward if they have witnessed. So again, we talked quite a lot today about being bystanders, and we're asking people if they've seen something happen to somebody else, they think it's just not right, could they come forward and tell us? And obviously, as we gather the evidence, and so far we've had 25 reports come through. There are themes which I'm going to leave Saira and Tamsin to talk about, but I must say I have been very struck and disturbed really by how fearful many people are about what to do if they experience something that's really poor. Now, of course, while we do this, and I'm just going to introduce this and then hand over, we also have seen other things happen around us that mean that the timing, I think, is going to hopefully be just, we never want these things to happen, but the timing of this intervention, we hope, will really help. We've seen the parliamentary review launched, Sexism in the City, which is being run by the Treasury Committee. Both Mark and myself gave evidence in front of the committee. The Diversity Project also sent in written response to the questions that the committee asked. We've also obviously got the FCA and the PRA have set out their proposals for changing conduct rules so that they include what they, I think, somewhat diplomatically / euphemistically describe as non-financial misconduct, although if you worked at Odey Asset Management, you might feel this has a big financial implication if you get this wrong. So I'm not sure there is anything such as non-financial misconduct, but so there are going to be rules coming down the tracks. And again, we are working, there is a team within the Diversity Project that is working on a response. We think some of the proposals could be tightened up somewhat to make it easier in some ways for firms to know what they should be doing if they have a problem. In short, it's time for action. And now I'm going to hand over to Saira. Actually, do you want me to keep on that? And you decide when you want to go on to the next slide.
So Tamsin and I are going to talk through some of the themes that have been emerging, both from a regulatory perspective, but also from the reporting that we've seen through Safe Space. I don't know whether okay, I've gone too far. I'll put this down for a second. So I will start off with the theme of addressing bad apples. We heard earlier from Darren, I think it was, You only talk to compliance when something's gone wrong. This is an example of that. So, as I mentioned, both the regulator and firms are looking at addressing bad apples. And we have seen the implementation of the Senior Managers and Certification regime since 2016, which had an underlying objective to improve conduct and culture within our industry. The idea was that bad apples shouldn't be terminated at one firm and then pop up at another firm having done something fairly bad. And this has been, the way this has been implemented is through the introduction of individual conduct rules and regulatory references. Now, whilst this has led to some improvements in conduct and culture within our industry, the biggest drawback is the inconsistency in application. When you think about regulatory references, firms think about what should we put on there, what shouldn't we put on there, and then you have the other side. When you're going to a new organisation, they will need to consider what is and isn't acceptable. So there's no sort of line drawn in the industry as to what is and isn't acceptable. And a number of firms will take advice, whether that's through consultants, legal advisors, or talking to other people. But what we really, really need is clear definitions, guidance around what the regulator expects from us as firms, but also something that defines a minimum standard. Helena mentioned earlier both regulators have published consultation papers in which they are looking to provide further clarity around conduct rules and what non-financial misconduct means. And we, as the Diversity Project, will be responding to that. And Helena also had a slide up earlier around the Sexism in the City report, and a number of the themes that you can see on this slide were also covered in that response. So whilst we're waiting for final rules and various organisations are responding to the regulator, what can we do in the meantime? So a couple of things that we've seen that do work is incorporating real-life examples into our annual training. So let's not just take an off-the-shelf training course, which may be a little bit 1980s, and just deliver that. Let's talk about what could actually happen, what is happening. We should update all of our boards and committees on what is happening in the industry, so they get a flavour of what is going on and what we need to be mindful of as a firm. Helena mentioned a few examples that we have seen in the industry. And I think the last thing that we can do is engage with others in the industry. So setting up small informal groups with your peers, talking to other industry groups, so whether that's, consultants, law firms, anybody that's doing a roundtable, for example, to understand, what can we learn from each other? What is it that everybody else is seeing? So I will hand over to Tamsin to cover some of the more spicier themes.
Thank you, Saira. So I'll start with harassment and bullying that happens in events outside of the workplace, which a number came up in the calls to safe space. So kind of practical things that you could do to try and stem that and prevent it is making sure that in your company handbooks you actually do talk to those kind of events, making sure that you cover quite wide-ranging potential. So everything from kind of working going to after-work drinks, conferences, parties, even kind of working abroad, etc. So actually putting some scenarios in for people to understand that certain standards of behaviour would be expected to carry through from the workplace into those scenarios. And also covering what to do if it happens, including
what happens if the person that the incident has happened with doesn't work at your organisation, and covering that you would take that seriously and that it would be addressed. I know there's work going on with the Diversity Project to cover that more broadly and help us work as more of a community, but actually putting that down so that people recognise that you as an organisation would even take action in those situations. And I guess more importantly is stopping it happening in the first place. So Saira talked about making sure that you have real life, very engaging training, but making sure in that training you cover social activities as well as things that happen within the workplace. So getting people to really engage with that and recognise that it's not acceptable, and articulating what behaviours are an expected standard. Some of the other themes that came up were microaggressions and abuse of power. I think it's really important here around education as well, so training, but also having discussions with people. Very often people don't recognise that some of the behaviours and things they say or the way they interact with people can cause other people to feel intimidated, to feel disrespected, and also the impact it has if that's in front of other people. So how other people will witness that behaviour, and it may undermine a particular individual if they are spoken to or acted with in a particular way. And also getting people to understand that may not be doing this consciously, the longer term impacts that that kind of behaviour can have on people. You know, impacting somebody's confidence can longer term impact their long term career progression, impact the way others view them and the respect that they earn from other people. So getting that on the table and getting people to really engage with it and understand will be the first step for people to stop and think about whether or not they need to change the way they are behaving. I know the Diversity Project are working on some videos that can be shared around the community that will be around people who've witnessed microaggressions or people that have been the recipients of it, talking it through. Again, those videos are intended so that we can kind of hold the mirror up to people, for people to watch and think, oh, perhaps that was me. I recognise now that that's not good, I need to change. And just enabling people to sit in other people's shoes is always really good at being able to kind of understand things that we need to change. So hopefully they're really useful. I guess finally the area I want to cover is around reporting and investigations. In the safe space, what came up time and time again is victims were finding it really difficult or uncomfortable and deciding not to speak up, and instead choosing obviously a very anonymous approach through safe space. I guess we all hope in our organisations that we create an environment of trust and don't have this where people feel fearful. Even when there's HR in organisations, people have come through safe space and said they don't feel safe to speak up. So how do we change that? One of the things I think you can do, you talked about training, but actually having specific training around harassment and bullying in the workplace, and make it interactive, make it live and in person. One of the things we've done recently is engage with our employment lawyers to deliver the training. It really emphasised how serious we took it. This wasn't an e-learning, or it wasn't Tamsin from HR running the sessions, but these were employment lawyers that could engage with the topic in a really meaningful way. We used a whole range of scenarios, crossing a real span of issues. And the feedback we had from employees was they really enjoyed it. I'm not sure that's been said very, very frequently about harassment training, but actually that they learned something. We tried to, we covered things like outside of the workplace harassment, and there were lots of people who were like, I'd never really thought about that. And keeping it live, not doing one and done, but each year varying it and making sure that it's updated with kind of the evolving space here. I know companies, and we're just trying it ourselves, have like anonymous hotlines. There's great software that you can use that mean you can anonymously engage two-way in conversations with people, which allows you to at least hear issues, even if they're not raised, that you can do something physically about, but that you can engage with the individual and really understand more about your organisation and its culture, and maybe encourage people to feel safe to speak up. And I guess finally, from a HR community, this is an evolving landscape, and making sure that us in HR are always kind of on the front foot and providing training. There's lots of new topics that we need to engage with that we can help our managers and help our leaders. Things like mental health, neurodiversity that we just heard about, the menopause, gender identity, making sure that we're really advanced in our understanding of this and can really help our organisations.
Great, and now I'm just going to pass straight to Mark, who's going to explain what we're doing next about it all.
Thank you. Thank you. Over the last few months, 20 or more women have come forward and had the courage to confide in Helena and share their experiences. Frankly, that's 20 plus too many. They've had the moral courage, and we thank them for that. But here's the thing. Would you do the same? Would you, if you were facing sexism, racism, or discrimination based on your abilities, your unique way of thinking, your religious beliefs, or who you love, would you come forward? Now, we're doing a survey to find out whether you would or whether you wouldn't. And if you point your cameras, and get them all out now if you haven't already got them out. Thank you. I can see some people coming up at the inner barcode. I'd encourage you all in the room and online, please take the survey. It's really important that we understand why you may or may not come forward, what's enabling you to come forward, and what's stopping you from coming forward. Whilst you're doing that, and it does take about 8 minutes, and we haven't got 8 minutes, so I'm going to finish before you do. I'm going to have a little bit of moral courage myself. When I first started in diversity decades ago, I'd be the only white man in the room. And it's amazing to see so many men in the room here today. I don't think that's representative of what's actually happening in our companies. Not all men are bad. Thank you. But I think we're failing to engage the good ones. Yeah, we need more men engaged in this topic, and we need to ensure that our language is right and it's not alienating them. We need a column for them in our intersectionality table. We need a work group dedicated to helping them to understand what the stake is in this for them. We need them to understand that this is a win-win. I think if we were doing these things, we'd be advancing at a much faster pace. We'd have more good men who have the moral courage to intervene and stop these appalling things happening before they happened. We wouldn't be talking about reporting them, we'd be stopping them. We'd have more men as agents of change, or cultural, I've forgotten the word you moved, cultural carriers. Thank you, Paris. I loved that. And helping drive culture and behavioural transformation that are more in line with our values. We can do this quicker and easier with the support of more good men, and they're a large part of the solution and could be engaged to neutralise the few men who are the big problem. What are we doing? Getting back to next steps. You're already taking that anonymous survey. That's still live. It's staying live for at least the next few weeks. Take it, do it. You've already mentioned we're about to launch for International Women's Day in 2024 a series of videos, not just videos, but things that you can show and share as part of your training programs to help engage more people in intervening and changing our culture, behaviour and values. The Pathway programme this year, for the first time, it's only the second year it's on, but it's going to have a, I'm doing well here, aren't I? A safe space.
Sounds big when you do
It's so big for the next. It's going to have a safe space element to it to support and help and educate. We are responding to the FCA consultation paper in collaboration with Reboot for a consistent Act with Integrity application. And we're going to publish a paper, guidance around events. It's the holiday season coming up. It's the Christmas parties. We all know, okay? It's got to stop. It's got to stop, and we're going to put some guidance together. We're also working with a business school to help put together research and explore the fear factor. And part of that research is the survey that you've just taken. That will help us understand how we can make the path easier and simpler and safer for you to come forward when these appalling things happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. Now, I know in theory I'm out of time, but I'm sitting here, so I'm going to sort of, keep going. Never get anywhere if you abide by all the rules. That's obviously lesson number one. Sorry, Linda, sorry. But I do feel it's important to share a couple of the questions that come forward. I'm going to just take a couple myself and then pass to one that I want to throw it to Tamsin, actually, so be warned. So one is just how can we reduce the potential for high-profile revenue-generating perpetrators who are so deeply financially relied upon that misconduct gets ignored. And I want to chip in on that one because I had someone in the distant past, so no one could work out who it was, who worked for me, committed something really heinous. And then I said, well, he can't come back. Obviously you have to go through the whole investigation and all the rest of it, but it was all in front of plain sight. Everyone could see what had happened. But I did get lobbied by some people who said, oh, he's such a big deal in terms of, running a desk, and he's got such fantastic performance. And I said, but no one's above the law. No one's above the just being a decent human being and behaving in an appropriate way. And we didn't lose a single client when we basically dismissed him. So I just want to say people have that moral courage, please. If leaders decide we're not going to tolerate this, and we are seeing, as coming through the evidence, time and again, what somebody else has commented, it's a note, he wants to put a note in that sexual harassment should have longer term consequences. Men get a slap on the wrist, obviously the bad men, not the good men, leave and get a promotion at another firm. And again, we have seen that. We have tracked someone who was let go for sexual harassment at one firm. The same thing happens second, we'll let go again, and there's nothing on his FCA certification record to suggest there's anything wrong. It's a live record, I've checked it, and there's nothing to suggest, and that is not good enough. So the reason why these things have never got fixed is because people have skirted around the issue, going back to that expression, not dealt with a difficult problem, but time's up, literally, on that issue. And I just want to ask Tamsin, because I think it's a very important, difficult question, and we've all seen this. So it says, the question is, some poor behaviour is not seen, and it has a bottling, emotional and mental consequence. So someone bottles it up. When reported, evidence is always asked for, so how can we tackle that? If something has deeply psychologically wounded somebody, for example, my husband and I discussing this when we were looking through the FCA consultation paper, and I showed him that you have to have a particularly serious misdemeanour for any sanctions that they're saying. So what if there's a stalker, say, or somebody who's really being intimidating, but there's no, they haven't sent emails or whatever, but somebody is very uneasy. What can be done then? What can the person do themselves to protect themselves?
I mean, from a HR perspective, when you're doing the investigations, I think it's really important that you delve into those, because bullying is often, that the consequences to individuals are exactly that. So I think just really understanding and being open and trying to encourage people to share those longer term impacts on them, even if they aren't understanding them themselves. I think that's the trick of a good interviewer, is to try and get people to explore those. And never to be afraid to speak up. I mean, that's what HR functions in many organisations, is that safe space to come and have a conversation. You may come out of the conversation and realise that it isn't as much of an issue, or you may come out of the conversation and realise it's more of an issue that you realise. But actually the first step in anything is vocalising it and sharing it with somebody to get that kind of two-way.
So don't assume nothing will happen just because it wasn't something with a physical or an obvious kind of impact. Okay, I think that's a very good advice. So thank you all. The fact that this is an issue as old as time is not going to stop the Diversity Project trying to fix it. And you have our commitment there, mine in particular. But anyways, so come back next year and we'll report back. Now, sorry, a couple of minutes late, I would like to welcome back Tunde on stage. Thank you very much.